Good evening, everyone. Hope you're all doing well this evening on this chilly evening. That's if you're in Melbourne. My name is Rebecca and I work in the Faculty of Education at Monash University. So thanks very much for coming along this evening from the comfort of your own home for our Master of Teaching webinar. This is going to be hopefully relatively informal. I'm just going to do a bit of a presentation at the start just to go through some basic information about the course, about entry requirements and those sorts of things. And then we'll move into questions because I think that's the main reason that you're all here this evening, is to just get as many of your questions answered as you possibly can. So we'll try and make that happen for you. Just a couple of housekeeping things actually to start with. If you do have any questions, please feel free to put them in the Zoom group chat, which is a function that you have through the Zoom platform. My colleagues Seshna and Jennifer are with us this evening, and they'll be monitoring the chat while I'm presenting so that if any questions pop up during then, they can help answer those. But we'll also be answering some questions live at the end, just via the live video. So some questions we'll answer via chat and some will answer via video. So we'll get started. Also, I should mention, okay, so if you can't hear me, and Seshna and Jen, I've just got one or two people just letting me know that they can't hear me. Usually that is a case that your speaker on your computer is selected to a different speaker. It's not selected to the system speaker. But maybe Jen and Seshna, if you could let everyone know about that in the chat. If you could maybe just pop a chat in there, just letting them know that if they're having any technical difficulties to chat you and help you out. Oh, we've got the problem solved for the person that was saying they couldn't hear, so that's great. If you do have any issues along the way, please pop them in the Zoom chat. If you have any questions, pop them in the Zoom chat. If you have a question that is private or personal, or you just don't want people to know your name when you're answering it, you can chat that privately to either Seshna or Jennifer, and they'll be able to help you out by passing that on. I'll try and keep an eye on the chat as well, but I might have a little bit of trouble with that if I'm sort of speaking and looking at the chat as well. So we'll see how we go. Oh, here we go. Okay, so hopefully you can all see my screen that's being shared. This is just my little bragging slide that I always start out with, just to let you know that if you do come and study a Master of Teaching with us at Monash, you're in good hands. We're actually quite proud of our rankings. #1 in Australia and top 15 in the world. That's for two very prominent university ranking systems. So, and this is something that we've consistently seen over the last few years for Monash, in the top 15 and certainly in the top 1 or 2 for quite some time. So we're very pleased with that. We also have a really excellent graduate employment rate with Monash Faculty of Education. So if you're coming to do a Master of Teaching with us, you know, and you can see there that 94.8 of our students that complete our Master of Teaching program find employment within 4 months of graduating. So that's a really positive statistic. And I think it really vouches for the quality of our program and also the professional connections that we have in our faculty that are evident through the placements that we provide to our students, and the quality of students that come through and do placements and then go out into the workforce. So you're in good hands. So you can see my lovely background here. This is a virtual background. I'm not standing in front of the Learning and Teaching building. In fact, it's quite dark outside at the moment, not a lovely twilight like that photo is. But the Faculty of Education at Monash teaches out of 2 different buildings, 2 different campuses, sorry, the Clayton campus and the Peninsula campus. The Clayton campus has the bulk of the specialisations taught out of it. And there's just one specialisation that is taught out of our Peninsula campus. That is our primary education specialisation. All of the other specialisations, which I will go into in a minute, are all taught from the Clayton campus. So these are the specialisations for the Master of Teaching. The Master of Teaching is a 2-year degree full-time. So that's 4 semesters. There are a couple of different specialisations that you can take in what we call an accelerated mode. So this means that technically the duration of the course is still considered 2 years because it's still 4 semesters. But if you study an accelerated mode, and this is available for the primary and secondary education and the secondary education specialisations, if you study this in accelerated mode, then you'll actually be completing about 1.5 calendar years, even though you're still completing the full duration and full course components. So what that means is a standard duration, which is all specializations. You will be doing a semester 1, semester 2, semester 1 and semester 2 across 2 years. If you're doing the accelerated mode for primary and secondary education or secondary education, you'd be studying for semester 1, semester 2, a summer semester, and then semester 1. So instead of finishing around sort of November at the end of the year, at the end of your second year, you'd be finishing around the end of June is usually the semester dates. And a very big thank you to Seshna and Jennifer for providing some handy links in the chat. So if you're interested in finding some more information and having a look while we're chatting, please feel free to head to those course links, the course maps and those sorts of things. I'm sure that we'll get some great information happening in that group chat during the presentation as well. So as I said, this is a 2-year standard duration course or 1.5 years accelerated. It's a full-time course. And we only have 1 intake per year for the Master of Teaching. So we only accept students in the semester 1 intake at Monash, which is usually starting in either late February or early March. So for 2021, I think it's very early March is the first semester starting date. So that's when the next available intake is for Master of Teaching. Now, I should also mention as well the purpose of a Master of Teaching. The Master of Teaching is a degree that is designed to be your initial teacher education degree, or ITE. What this means is it's the first degree that people take if they're wanting to become a registered teacher in Australia. So at Monash, we have a couple of different options of how you can become a teacher. You can do a Bachelor of Education Honours with us. That's a 4-year degree, and it's usually for people that are coming straight out of high school or they've finished high school and taken a break, but they haven't done any other undergraduate degrees or bachelor degrees before. You can do that Bachelor of Education Honours, 4 years, you finish and you can register as a teacher with the Victorian Institute of Teaching. The Master of Teaching is the same sort of thing, but it's for people that have already completed a bachelor degree. So if you've come out of school, you've gone into a degree, you've finished your bachelor degree in something else, not education, and you want to become a teacher, then a Master of Teaching is the degree that you need to do. So both of those options, the Bachelor of Education Honours and the Master of Teaching, are both accredited by the Victorian Institute of Teaching and are considered in terms of registration an equally good way of becoming a teacher. But obviously, if you've completed a bachelor degree already, then we're going to recommend that you complete the Master of Teaching because it's only a 2-year degree, not a 4-year degree. And you don't want to have to go back and do 4 extra years of study if you don't have to, and you only need to do 2. You want to get out there into the workforce and get teaching and get inspiring and leading and developing students for the future. So, a really important part of the Master of Teaching is professional experience. Actually, I'm going to go back a bit first. I'm just going to mention, this might seem like really basic information for some of you, but I just want to clarify in case there's a few people that either aren't familiar with the Australian school system or maybe just haven't been in the school system for quite a while and just want a little bit of extra detail. These specialisations refer to the sector of education that you're working in. So you've got the early years or early childhood education sector, which is sort of moving through childcare and kindergarten and preschool and all those sorts of things. And then you've got primary education, which is about age 6 until about age 12 or 13. And then you've got secondary education, which is high schools in Australia and middle schools. So that's for students aged around 12 to 18 years old. So the nice thing about Monash is that we cover all three of those different sectors of education across our specialisations, but you can also, if you don't want to focus on just one, you can combine two and do what we call a dual sector qualification or specialisation. So you can do early years and primary education and come out at the end qualified to teach in both of those areas. And the same with primary and secondary. You can study a Master of Teaching, and at the end, you'll have the qualifications necessary to go and work in a primary school or in a secondary school if you want to. Or, which is really popular, you can go and get a job in a P to 12 school, which the principals of those schools love students that have completed our dual sector qualification, because it means they've done primary and secondary, and they can really handle any situation that's thrown at them within that school. So, professional experience, I'm just going to mention this briefly because it is a really important part of the degree. So for your Master of Teaching, you'll complete a minimum of 60 days of compulsory professional experience. This is experience in schools or in early childhood education centres or kindergartens. So depending on your specialisation will depend which level of study you're doing your placements. Those 60 days are pretty much evenly spread across the 2 years. So you'll be doing a 15-day placement each semester during your 2-year degree. So 60 days is the minimum. There are a lot of the times additional opportunities for students to go on sort of voluntary placements and help out with school programs and those sorts of things. Our faculty comes across those sorts of opportunities quite frequently, and we communicate them to our students either through the placements team in our faculty or through our various social media and student communications channels. So there's always extra things you can do if you're wanting to get more experience on top of those compulsory 60 days. We have, of course, most of our students going and doing their 60 days of placement in schools around Melbourne and the Melbourne area. But you also, if you want to, have the opportunity to go and do placements in other areas as well. So if you want to go off and do a placement, what we could call a rural placement or a country placement, we have a few opportunities for students to do that. For example, we have a great program where students go down the Bass Coast and do a placement in one of the schools around that area and get a full immersion into a different regional area than just having your Melbourne and Melbourne suburbia. So there's a nice sort of juxtaposition there between the different kinds of placement experiences that you get. You don't have to do those rural or regional placements, but they are an option for students if you're interested. We also have international students, international placements, not students, we do have international students. International placements are an opportunity for students as well. So we have about 8 different countries that you can apply to do a placement in. You can see a couple of the pictures there. We have Italy, which is a lovely, lovely location. That's a picture from Florence, I think, which is just near the placement location of Prato in Italy. And we also have Switzerland pictured there. We also have places like China and Hong Kong and various other places around the world, UAE, Cook Islands, all sorts of different options. Obviously right now during COVID-19 and the travel restrictions that are happening, we don't have those placements happening right now, but of course we do plan to re-implement those as soon as it's safe to do so. So yeah, some great placement opportunities. This is really the foundation of your teaching degree. This is where you get to apply everything that you've learned during your degree. So the great thing about being able to do a placement every semester is that you're able to apply that knowledge as you go. So every semester you'll be doing specific units and building on your knowledge and skills. And every semester you'll be doing a placement where you can use that knowledge and skills from the units you're doing and apply it to a real world setting where you're working with teachers who are in the job and you're working with real students in real classrooms so that you're really, really prepared when you finish. So as I said, I don't want to talk for too long and just talk at you. I really want to get into answering questions. So I'm going to go straight into entry requirements and how to apply now. So entry requirements, there is a little bit to go through. It can get a little bit complex, but we'll see how we go. All of the specialisations require an undergraduate degree or a bachelor degree. This needs to be the equivalent of an Australian degree. So it doesn't mean that if you've studied overseas, you're an international student or you're a domestic student that did your bachelor degree overseas. That doesn't mean that you can't study this course. It just means that our admissions team will need to verify with their comparison spreadsheets and databases that, that your degree is equivalent to an Australian bachelor degree. You also need to have that bachelor degree with a minimum 60% overall average grade. Now, again, this is based on an Australian academic system. If you're coming from overseas and you have a different education system that has a different passing grade than 50%, then we would adjust accordingly. Now, we do mention here that the requirement may be higher. This is, I know, a bit of a vague statement. I'm sorry about that. But basically what this means is that we do reserve the right to rank our applicants. If we have a large cohort of applications and we have more applications than we do places, then we may need to rank our applications, which may mean that not everyone who meets that minimum credit average will get an offer. There's also offers will depend on availability of secondary specialist teaching areas as well, which I'll mention in a moment. But this is your sort of general baseline. If you've got your Australian equivalent of a bachelor degree with a minimum 60% average grade, then we encourage you to apply. I've just got a question that's popped up that we've are placements done in 3-week blocks of 15 days or spread across the semester? My understanding is that currently they're done in 3-week blocks of 15 days, but you can apply for a variation of placement if you have a significant issue that's preventing you from being able to complete your placement during the specific times that are scheduled. So, yeah. The IELTS mentioned there, this is only relevant for you if you haven't completed your studies in Australia or in English as the language of instruction. So for example, if you're an international student coming from a country where English is not the first language, then you may be required to complete, to provide English language, evidence of English language proficiency. And the standard way of doing this is by sitting an IELTS test. There are a number of other ways that you can meet this English language proficiency requirement, but IELTS is just a benchmark that a lot of people are familiar with. So I always pop it in there so that you have an idea if that's something that you need to think about. The other requirement that applies to all specialisations is the CASPA requirement. So CASPA is a non-academic assessment tool that Monash and a number of other universities in Victoria use to assess students for the Master of Teaching. Basically, what this has come about from is the Victorian government a couple of years ago decided that it was really important for the quality of students going into teaching degrees and then also going out of teaching degrees into the teaching workforce, really important that they have specific qualities or professional and personal attributes that are really inherent in someone that wants to be a teacher. So we know that everyone can learn, but not everyone necessarily can teach. So CASPA is just a way for us to be able to have a little look at certain qualities that we think are really, really important for people that want to be a teacher and assess and make sure that the people that are applying for the course have those inherent attributes. So CASPA is an online test. It takes about 90 minutes, depending on whether you have a break in the middle or not. And it's all done online and it's mostly video based. It's a scenario based test that usually you'll have a video scenario pop up. So you'll have actors on it in a video acting out a situation, and then you'll be asked a series of short answer questions, or a couple of short answer questions about what you might do if you were in that situation. So it's about us being able to assess characteristics like teamwork, willingness to learn, motivation to teach, communication, empathy, all those sorts of things that we think are really important for teachers to have. So that's the CASPER test. It's something that you need to register for as a part of the application process, but I will mention that in a moment. I do just want to let you know, though, that this is not a super scary requirement, okay? It's not designed to trip you up. It's not designed to, you know, cull out a lot of applications for us. It's really something that we're trying to just use as a baseline to make sure that we've got people that are enthusiastic and motivated and wanting to become teachers, which I think, given that you've all taken the time and you're, you know, really enthusiastic and wanting to watch a webinar online about Master of Teaching, hopefully you all have those qualities because you're interested and you're engaged. So that's CASPER for the moment, but I'm happy to answer more questions about CASPER as we go along as well. I just want to touch on the additional entry requirements for different specializations first, though, because this is important. So basically, if you're wanting to apply for one of the specializations involving primary education, so that would apply to the early childhood or early years and primary, the primary and secondary education specializations, you must have at least 1 year of the equivalent of full-time study in one or more areas of the primary school curriculum. What on earth does that mean? I hear several people saying through the airwaves or the video waves of Zoom. What that means is that we just want to make sure when you're assessing your application that you've done some study in an area that's relevant to the primary school curriculum. So the primary school curriculum is very, very broad. So I'm going to go out on a limb here and say that probably most degrees that we would see from people here tonight would qualify for this requirement. I'll give you an example. For example, if you've done a Bachelor of Engineering honours, this might not immediately seem like it's relevant to the primary school curriculum. However, when you look at the subjects that you've actually completed, I'm sure that if you've done a Bachelor of Engineering honours, and I'm pretty sure because I've seen a lot of transcripts like this, that you have a lot of studies in mathematics, you have a lot of studies in different sciences, and maths and sciences are all very, very relevant and a key part of the primary school curriculum. Other things that are really key for primary school curriculum are things like English, things like humanities and social science and cultural studies. All those sorts of things are relevant. So don't look at that requirement and be super scared. Just be aware that that is something that we'll be looking at. But our admissions team will do a full assessment when you pop in your application so that we'll be able to confirm with you whether you've met that requirement or not. Now, the other requirement that you need to meet is if you're applying for a specialisation that includes secondary education. So this applies for the primary and secondary education specialisation and also the secondary education specialisation. For the specialist teaching areas or the subjects that you want to teach in high schools, you actually need to have a background in those areas, an academic background. Again, what does that mean? Basically, what it means is that when you've studied your bachelor degree, you need to have had a major in one of the areas that you want to be able to teach in high schools. So for example, if you're applying for primary and secondary education, you can see there, you need to have your year of full-time learning for the primary school curriculum to meet that primary education requirement. You also have to have a major area of study in one secondary teaching area. I'm going to bring up the list of those in a moment, but I think also Sessional or Jen might be able to post the link to the secondary specialist teaching area requirements so that you can take a look at those and see what the, I guess, the nitty-gritty of all the different areas are. but I'll flick to the slide now so that you can have a look. These are all the different secondary specialist teaching areas that we offer at Monash. So these are all corresponding to secondary subjects or subjects that are taught in high schools. So if you want to study primary and secondary education, you need to have a major in one of these areas from your bachelor degree. If you're wanting to study secondary education, just secondary, not primary and secondary, you need to have a major in one of these areas or and at least a minor in one other of these areas. Or if you've got if you meet the major for one of the ones that's listed as a double area, then you don't need that minor. Sorry, I know it's a little complicated, but hopefully this is making sense. So basically the requirement is primary and secondary education, you need one area for secondary. Secondary education, you need two areas, because when you graduate, you'll be qualified to teach two subjects in high school. And when you graduate from a primary and secondary education specialisation, you'll be qualified to teach one subject in high schools, but you'll also have that whole separate qualification of being able to teach all the curriculum across primary. So it kind of evens out a little bit. Hope this is making sense. I'm going to move on to how to apply, but we can always go back to these slides if you want a bit more clarification. And I can see that there are a few things popping up during the questions as well. So we do have a question that's popped up about land title. I can see that Session has just answered it in the group chat. So just clarifying, Landtite is the literacy and numeracy test for initial teacher education. This is a requirement for primary and secondary education, so any specialisation involving those different sectors. It's a requirement for you during your course before you graduate, but it's not an admissions requirement, so it's not a part of the entry requirements. The only test that's a requirement for entry requirements is the CASPER test and an English language test if that's a requirement for you if you don't have your studies in the language of English. So hopefully that clarifies that. Now, how to apply, we've got all the application dates up here. I noticed that someone did ask that in the chat not too long ago. So it's a little bit different depending on whether you're a domestic student or an international student. International students, we have what we call rolling applications because of visa requirements. So if you're an international student, applications are open now and they'll continue to be open until the 22nd of January 2021 for the 2021 intake in early March. So, but if you're a domestic student, or basically that means an Australian or New Zealand citizen or an Australian permanent resident, then we actually have rounds of applications. So if you apply in between August and towards the end of September, then that's round one, and you'll be getting your offer or your offer results, hopefully an offer, about 3 weeks after that. Again, round two, end of November is the closing date for applications for that round. You'll be getting your offers around sort of mid-December for that. Round three, because it's a little bit shorter and it's a little bit closer to the start of semester, the window is a bit shorter, and also the offer turnaround is a little bit shorter as well. So offers, I think, are released about 2 weeks after the closing date for round three. And I've got a little note there saying Commonwealth supported places are available. So in case you don't know what that means, Commonwealth supported places is what a lot of people know as HECS. Basically, this is available to domestic students that are eligible for a HECS place, which is most students, even if you've already completed a bachelor degree, because usually you won't have met the maximum HECS threshold. Basically, it means that your fees are subsidised. So your fees will cost a lot less than what we would call a full fee place. Your fees are subsidised significantly by the government, And you're also given a government loan under the HECS help system, which means that you don't have to pay any of your fees up front. So that's for domestic students that are eligible for HECS, and it's a really fantastic program. And I would say the majority of our domestic students would usually qualify for a Commonwealth supported place. Now, we've got a question that's just popped up about primary education, and I do just want to touch on this because I kind of glossed over it a little bit when we were talking about the campuses and the different delivery options. Primary education, I did mention, is the only specialisation that's delivered from the Peninsula campus. It's also the only specialisation that is delivered in an off-campus mode or online mode. So what this means, obviously things are a little bit different right now because of the COVID-19 situation. We're currently delivering subjects completely online. That's hopefully going to change soon. But in general and under, I guess, normal instead of COVID normal times, normally all of our specialisations are only available in a face-to-face or on-campus mode, except for primary education, which has the option for off-campus. So if you're studying primary education, you can actually study that from overseas or interstate or wherever you happen to be located. You don't have to come to campus at all for that program. And you can complete your placements in the place that you're located and studying from. You don't have to come to Melbourne or Victoria to do placements. You can do them interstate or overseas. We would need you to take a bit of an active role in finding your placements though, unlike when you're an on-campus student and our placements team sort everything out for you and find all of your placements and place you in all of the schools themselves. But when you're studying overseas, you need to take an active role in arranging your own placement. Now, CASPA requirement, just want to mention again, so this is a compulsory part of the application process, but what we do recommend is that you actually submit your application first, and then you can use your Monash student ID number that's generated when you submit your application to register for the CASPA test. The reason we ask that you do that is because when you register for CASPA, you'll actually be asked to nominate which university or universities you're sitting the test for, and it'll ask you for an ID number. And so that means that when CASPA assess your test, so it's assessed independently, not by Monash, so we have independent professional test assessors that look after this. When that's done, they'll actually be able to look at your ID number and send your results directly to Monash so that there'll be no issue with identifying who is a Monash student and who's a student for a different university. So it makes things really easy, nice and easy for us to be able to match up your CASPA results with your application to Monash.